Battle through the heavens. Xiao Yan and Lin Yan were walking toward the city when a majestic city wall, that carried a foreboding aura, appeared in front of them. Humans were coming and going under the towering city gate. The entire place was filled with a noisy atmosphere. The two of them smoothly entered the city. They looked at the spacious road and at the endless shops and buildings on both sides of the road. The black mass of human heads and the noise they created on the street transformed into a large sound wave that spread apart, charging to the clouds. Tianhuang City is really exuberant. It can likely even be compared with the few most prosperous cities within the Black Corner region. Xiao Yan involuntarily clicked his tongue and praised as he looked over the mighty city and the human traffic. This is the middle region of the Central Plains, the entire continent's central area. Although the Black Corner region is also quite strong, how could it compare with this place? Lin Yan laughed. He immediately identified their route and led Xiao Yan to the location of the Lu clan's home. He had once stayed in this place for a period of time. Hence, he was quite familiar with Tianhuang City. Xiao Yan followed behind Lin Yan. They walked down a couple of long roads and took a couple of turns before an extremely spacious manor appeared in front of their eyes. This manor was extremely large. Moreover, there were a couple of guards with weapons in their hands currently outside of the manor. Their alert gazes swept all around them. Xiao Yan was startled when he saw the tight defenses of the manor. He said with surprise, "Is there a need for so many guards in broad daylight?" Lin Yan was also stunned. A moment later, he frowned and softly said, "There seems to be something wrong. The Lu clan did not post so many guards in the past." Wait for a moment. Once Lin Yan said this, his eyes wandered before he stopped a man who was hastily walking by. He cupped his hands together and smiled as he asked, "Friend, may I know what has happened in this Tianhuang city? Why is the Lu clan acting like this?" The person whom Lin Yan had stopped glanced at him doubtfully before asking, "Have you come from somewhere else?" Currently, the Lu clan and the Qing clan are fighting for the management rights of the Wormhole. The two clans have led quite a number of people to the open area in the middle of the city. Everyone in the city has run over to watch the show. Lin Yan once again knit his brows when he heard this. He cupped his hands to the person in front of him before turning around and walking to Xiao Yan's side. In a soft voice, he whispered, "Sorry, I remember that it should be the Lu clan's turn to own the management rights of the Wormhole this year. Why has a fight occurred?" Xiao Yan had also heard what that person had said earlier. He immediately grinned and said, "Won't we know if we head to the middle of the city and take a look?" Lin Yan nodded. He immediately laughed, "Looks like Lu Qing isn't having an easy time being clan head. Follow me, such a fight is uncommon." After saying this, Lin Yan turned around and led the way. He swiftly walked to the middle of the city. Xiao Yan also smiled and followed close behind. In the middle of Tianhuang City was an extremely spacious area made of green rock. A stone platform was located in the center of the open ground. On it was an enormous dark black wormhole that was slowly rotating. A shocking spatial ripple was spreading from it. Currently, the area around the open ground was occupied by a dense sea of people. The noise from it was like a demon's voice, causing one's eardrum to feel some pain. A countless number of curious eyes were watching the middle of the open ground. There were two groups of people facing off against each other in that spot. "Chen Yao, the Wormhole should be managed by my Lu clan this year. What do you mean by your actions today?" The one leading the group on the left side was a well-built man. He was frowning and there was an aura of power even without anger. This kind of face was somewhat familiar. If one were to look carefully, one would realize that that person could not be anyone other than Lu Qing. The current Lu Qing no longer possessed the spirit he had back then. Replacing that spirit was a kind of calmness. After all, the Lu clan needed a qualified clan head, not a young and impulsive boy. There were two white-haired old men behind Lu Qing. These two people were standing randomly, but they possessed a majestic aura that quietly rippled. No one dared to underestimate them as a result. Additionally, there was a voluminous, beautiful figure standing by the side. This lady was wearing red clothes. Her face was peach blossom-like and was filled with an allure. Any man who saw her would feel attracted. This face was also familiar. She possessed an alluring name, Lu Fei. Back then, she had a small conflict with Xiao Yan in the inner academy. However, after a few years, the current Lu Fei appeared even more alluring. She was just like matured peach that caused the eyes of quite a number of men to involuntarily drift toward her. He, Lu Qing, if we were to talk about it, you are 1 generation younger than me. You should not be speaking in such a disrespectful manner to a senior. There was a similar large group of people with fierce looks opposite Lu Qing's group. Their leader was a middle-aged man. His eyes glanced at Lu Qing in a sinister manner before he strangely laughed. Lu Qing's face revealed a cold smile when he heard this. He was just about to say something when an elderly voice sounded in the open ground. This is the newest order from my burning flame valley. A countless number of gazes instantly turned when they heard this voice. All they saw was a crimson-robed, old man standing with his hands behind him. There were quite a number of red-colored speckles on his old face. Elder Qi Hua from the Burning Flame Valley. The open ground emitted numerous exclamations when the people saw this old man. The expressions of Lu Qing and the two old men behind him slightly changed. Immediately, they cupped their hands and said in a courteous manner, "It is actually Elder Qi Hua. May I know what is the reason of this new order?" According to the rules of the past, now is not the time for the handing over of the wormhole management rights. The valley chief has given the order. He requires some high-tier alchemists to head to the Burning Flame Valley to help his elderly self refine a medicinal pill. However, he has yet to find any suitable person until now. Hence, he has issued this order. Any clan who can find a high-tier alchemist will obtain the management rights of the wormhole. This will be effective for 3 years. The old man who was called Elder Qi Hua spoke in a faint voice. The Qing clan has found a tier 6 alchemist who has been acknowledged by the Pill Tower. If your Lu clan can also find one and invite him to follow me to the Burning Flame Valley, this wormhole will be handed to you. Moreover, the rights will be extended from 1 year to 3 years. Elder Qi Hua pointed in the direction of the Qing clan. There was an old man in a purple-colored alchemist robe, who was standing with his hands behind him. A tier 6 alchemist. Lu Qing's expression changed when he heard this. Their Lu clan did indeed also possess an alchemist. However, the best was only a tier 5 alchemist. They had never owned a tier 6 alchemist. After all, an alchemist at that tier would be able to obtain good treatment from a faction like the Burning Flame Valley. Who would come to their clan, which was neither large nor small? Elder Qi Hua, this matter has occurred too suddenly. Can you give our Lu clan a couple of days? We will definitely go all out to find a tier 6 alchemist. Lu Qing's expression changed rapidly before he spoke in this manner. Elder Qi Hua shook his head. His tone was his usual monotonous one. This is an order personally given by the valley chief. Who dares to delay? Forget about your Lu clan, even the old me does not have that ability. If your Lu clan fails to invite a tier 6 alchemist today, you will hand the management rights of the wormhole to the Qing clan. Lu Qing's expression was quite ugly when he heard Elder Qi Hua not giving them the slightest amount of face. He clenched his hand. Where would he go and find a tier 6 alchemist within a day? Did they really think that a tier 6 alchemist was as common as cabbage? An alchemist at such a tier was a strength that was near the top even within the Pill Tower. This old fellow, who will not die, has definitely been bribed by the Qing clan. Lu Fei grit her silver teeth behind Lu Qing as she spoke with great displeasure. Shut up. Lu Qing's expression sank. When she heard him, Lu Fei could only stomp her feet while feeling wronged. She ceased speaking after that. What should we do, elders? Lu Qing turned his head, looked at the two old men behind him, and sighed. The two old men could only bitterly laugh when they heard this. They said, "We have also vaguely heard information about the Burning Flame Valley searching for a high-tier alchemist. However, we did not pay much attention to it." Unexpectedly. Fei is likely right. Someone must have informed the Qing clan beforehand. I have also heard of this tier 6 alchemist. It is rumored that he is a high-rank alchemist who advanced to the tier 6 level a long time ago. It is likely very difficult to find someone who is of a higher tier within Tianhuang City. Lu Qing's heart sank when he heard the two of them speak in such a manner. His fist was clenched tightly until it emitted a cracking sound. The wormhole was too important to the Lu clan. This was an extremely large source of income for them. Only with this income as a foundation would their Lu clan be able to hire even more capable people to expand their faction. However, if it were to be snatched by the Qing clan, their development rate would end up slowing if not stopping. Cuckoo, nephew Lu, you should not continue to have a bee in your bonnet. Just calmly hand over the management rights of the wormhole. If I am happy in the future, I might distribute some small profits for the Lu clan to enjoy. The middle-aged man called Qing Yao involuntarily laughed in a strange manner when he saw Lu Qing's change in expression. Lu Qing's face had turned much greener when he heard this quiet ridicule from the other party. However, he was currently the head of the Lu clan. Every single action of his needed to take into consideration of the entire clan. He immediately suppressed the fury in his heart and clenched his teeth with great unwillingness. After which, he spoke in a deep, dark voice, "Qing Yao, you can consider yourself ruthless. Let's go." After saying this, Lu Qing could only wave his hand with a green face before turning around to leave. He, Lu Qing, this is unlike you. Are you going to just give up in this manner? A figure suddenly rushed over from outside of the open ground and laughed at Lu Qing when he had just turned his body. Lin Yan. Lu Qing was startled when he saw the person who had arrived. He immediately sighed as he said with a bitter smile, "Forget it. Let's leave. You are not a tier 6 alchemist and cannot help me." Hearing this, Lin Yan chuckled in a strange manner. He said, "I might not be able to help you, but someone can help you." After saying these words, he turned his head, and shouted to the sky, "How long do you intend to stay up there?" Lu Qing, Lu Fei, and the others were startled when they saw Lin Yan's actions. They immediately raised their heads, only to see a young man walking through the air, heading over. Immediately, the young man landed gently on the ground. Walking through the air, an elite dozong. The hearts of Lu Qing's group felt a chill upon seeing this scene. He was just about to cup his hands and say some courteous words when a familiar laugh, that he could not forget, suddenly sounded. This laughter caused his body to abruptly stiffen. "Lu Qing, it has been a few years since we have last met. Are you well?" The familiar soft laugh caused Lu Qing's body to momentarily stiffen. A moment later, he finally recovered. His face was filled with disbelief as he looked at the unknown young man. You are Xiao Yan." Lu Qing's words had just sounded and Lu Fei's lovely body behind him suddenly trembled. Xiao Yan, a name that had left behind an impression in heart that was difficult to remove. This true genius of the inner academy back then was someone even her cousin brother, whom she was proud of, could not catch up to. Her pretty eyes secretly observed the young man in front of her. She was slightly startled when they paused on the somewhat foreign face. Her cautious eyes discovered some clues and her hands slightly shook under her sleeves. Her eyes began to dodge him. Back then, she had developed a small grudge with Xiao Yan. It was due to this grudge that Xiao Yan had exchanged blows with Lu Qing. The result, however, had caused the support within her heart to completely collapse. Until now, Lu Fei could not forget that skinny figure that stood proudly in the fighting arena back then. At that time, Xiao Yan was merely a young man who had just arrived at the inner academy. However, his achievements had attracted the eyes of the entire inner academy. Is it, really him? The back of Lu Fei's teeth bit her lower red lip. Beauties had always liked heroes since ancient times. In this world there were many people stronger than her cousin brother, whom she thought of as seemingly undefeatable in her heart. This also caused her to hold back her unruly self and learn to treat others gently. He looks somewhat different, but his voice is still the same. Xiao Yan smiled and waved his hands. His eyes swept over Lu Qing as he spoke with an involuntary surprise. 7-star Dou Huang. Not bad. You are much stronger than Lin Yan. Lu Qing was finally able to confirm the identity of the person in front after hearing this familiar tone. An excitement surged into his eyes. His eyes also swept over Xiao Yan and the expression on his face became slightly dull. He bitterly laughed. It is likely that you have already broken through to the Dou Zone class, right? He had clearly watched Xiao Yan walk through the air earlier. The faces of the people behind Lu Qing changed a little upon hearing his words. Their eyes were surprised as they swept over Xiao Yan's body. It was really rare to find such a young expert Dou Zone. I was merely lucky. Xiao Yan slightly smiled, but did not deny it. Ugh, I am still unable to catch up with you. You are indeed worthy of being the person with the most outstanding talent in the inner academy. I have no choice but to admit it, Lu Qing sighed. Back then, when he had half a foot into the Dou Wang class, Xiao Yan was merely just a Dou Ling, yet within a short few years, Xiao Yan had already reached a level that he could only look up to. This extreme change was really a little difficult to accept. Xiao Yan smiled. His eyes swept over Lu Fei's face behind Lu Qing and smiled as he nodded to her. Under his smile, a bright redness rose onto her face. Her pretty eyes swiftly turned away. All of you did not wait for me when you left back then. I thought that something had happened to you. Xiao Yan's eyes slid back to Lu Qing as he spoke with a smile. Lin Yan said that you had already taken your revenge and it was pointless for us to stay any longer. Hence, we had formed a group and left the Jiama Empire. That's right, why are you here? Lu Qing spoke with a smile. The greenish color on his face had greatly diminished. Clearly, his heart felt extremely happy at being able to meet Xiao Yan here. I need to head to the Pill region. Tianhuang City possesses a wormhole that leads to the Pill region, so I came to visit you along the way. Xiao Yan smiled. His eyes swept over the people from the Qiong clan not far away without leaving a trace. Lu Qing nodded his head when he heard this. He immediately laughed in an unconstrained manner. After today, the wormhole will be opened once again. I will help you get things ready. Leave this small matter to me. It is already the Qiong clan's turn to manage the wormhole. They have always viewed our Lu clan as an eyesore. Cousin brother, they will only make things difficult if you were to show yourself. Lu Fei, who was behind Lu Qing, muttered. Lu Qing's expression sank and Lu Fei ceased speaking. What has happened? Do you need my help? Xiao Yan appeared to have not seen Lu Qing's face. His eyes moved to Lu Fei as he asked with a smile. Nothing, it is only some small trouble. Let's go back first. Since you have arrived in Tianhuang City, I will have to properly receive you no matter what. Lu Qing waved his hand, pulled Xiao Yan's shoulders, and laughed. I have never said such words when you followed me to the Jia Ma Empire back then. Xiao Yan looked at Lu Qing and softly chuckled. Lu Qing's hand stiffened in midair. His eyes landed on Xiao Yan before he let out a bitter laugh. He sighed, this is not the Jia Ma Empire. Just the strength of a Qing clan is stronger than the Misty Cloud sect. If you were to intervene, it is likely that you will end up attracting some trouble. Haha, Lu Qing, you have really underestimated Xiao Yan. He has just fought his way out of the Wind Lightning Pavilion. Even the chief of the Wind Lightning Northern Pavilion, Fei Tian, could not do anything to him. Just what is a small Qing clan? Lin Yan by the side curled his mouth as he blurted out. Lu Qing and the two elders behind him were stunned when they heard this. Their faces immediately changed a little. Fighting his way out of the Wind Lightning Pavilion? Don't listen to the nonsense this fellow is sprouting. I have only just come down from the Lightning Mountain and had some grudge with the Wind Lightning Pavilion. However, it has already been settled. Xiao Yan waved his hand and smiled as he downplayed the story. His tone might appear like a light breeze, but the danger hidden within was something that Lu Qing and the others could vaguely sense. Lu Fei's eyes contained an unusual flicker as they slowly swept over Xiao Yan. Lu Qing let out a shocked exclamation before beginning to struggle a little. Finally, he sighed, it is a trouble that is caused by this wormhole. Originally, it should be my Lu clan's turn to control this wormhole this year. However, the Burning Flame Valley has used this as a bargaining chip in order to find a high-tier alchemist. That Qing clan has found a tier 6 alchemist from somewhere. However, the highest tier alchemist in my Lu clan is only a tier 5. Why is the Burning Flame Valley searching for a high-tier alchemist? With their ability, it is not possible for them to not possess any alchemists, no? Xiao Yan asked with some doubt. I am not too certain about this. However, it is rumored that the valley chief of the Burning Flame Valley wants to refine a medicinal pill that requires the help of some high-tier alchemists. Lu Qing shook his head and replies. Xiao Yan slightly nodded. His eyes were suddenly thrown onto the proud face of the purple-robed, old man a short distance away as he said, in other words, as long as you have an alchemist whose tier is higher than that of the old fellow, this wormhole will be returned to the Lu clan to manage. Lu Qing nodded. Some hope involuntarily rose in his heart when he looked at Xiao Yan. He was aware that Xiao Yan was also an alchemist. Moreover, he had already been able to refine a tier 5 medicinal pill when he was at the inner academy back then. With his talent, it was impossible for Xiao Yan not to have any improvement. According to his guesses, the current Xiao Yan should be a tier 6 alchemist. Although Xiao Yan might not surpass that purple-robed, old man, he would at the very least not be much weaker. Xiao Yan smiled when he saw this. He slowly stepped forward and cupped his hands toward the red-robed, old man. With a smile, he said, this senior, the Lu clan has yet to admit defeat. Please wait for a moment before handing the wormhole over. Elder Qihua had discovered Xiao Yan the moment he had appeared. He was similarly shocked that Xiao Yan was able to reach the Dou Zone class at such an age. It was likely that among the same generation, there was hardly anyone who could reach such an achievement. If the clan has yet to admit defeat, please invite the alchemist. Should the alchemist that the Lu clan find be stronger than Grandmaster Xiao, the management rights of this wormhole will belong to the Lu clan. Perhaps it was because Elder Qihua was aware of Xiao Yan's current strength, but his tone was much more polite when he spoke. Xiao Yan grinned and nodded when he heard this. After which, he turned his eyes to the purple-robed, old man, cupped his hands together, and smiled as he said, in that case, please allow the little me to compete with this Grandmaster Xiao. What do you say? You are the alchemist that the Lu clan has invited? Elder Qi Huo was stunned when he heard this. His eyes slowly swept over Xiao Yan's body. He involuntarily felt some disbelief. Xiao Yan's status as a Dou Zong at his age had already shocked Elder Qi Huo greatly. If he possessed an alchemist status, would he not be a little too terrifying? Dou Qi training and pill refinement skills were two extremely profound paths. It was extremely difficult for one to become outstanding in any one of the two categories. There were very few who could successfully obtain great achievements on both paths. These words of Xiao Yan had also started a commotion among the crowd below. However, most people scoffed at Xiao Yan's words. Although this young man was quite strong, it did not mean that he had the qualification to challenge an alchemist like Grandmaster Xing Xiu. Being one of the party involved, Xing Xiu was also startled. However, a cold smile flashed across his shriveled face. He looked at Xiao Yan and said, "Perhaps the old me might really be unable to compete with you in terms of Dou Qi, but in terms of alchemist skills. I shall say something that you may not like to hear. You do not possess the qualification." Xiao Yan ignored this cold laugh of Xing Xiu. His eyes turned to Elder Qi Huo as smiled and said, "May I know how are we going to compete? Should we refine a medicinal pill on the spot? There is no need for such trouble. The old me does not have much time to waste with you." Xing Xiu replied instead. He coldly laughed and said, "Since you are also an alchemist, you should also be aware of the importance of one's spiritual strength. In that case, we shall compete in terms of spiritual strength. On account of you being from a younger generation, the old me shall allow you to attack first. As long as you can force me back with your spiritual strength, it will be considered your victory." One could not blame Xing Xiu for being this arrogant. The greatest gap between an alchemist and an ordinary Dou practitioner was their spiritual strength. A Tier 6 alchemist's spiritual strength was comparable to an expert Dou Zong. Xiao Yan was initially stunned when he heard Xing Xiu's words. His expression swiftly became a little strange. Competing spiritual strength? Xing Xiu waved his sleeves and stood with his hands behind him after speaking. His eyes glanced at Xiao Yan indifferently. The demeanor of a grandmaster was fully displayed. "Begin." Xiao Yan slightly widened his mouth. Immediately, it turned into a soft sigh. He slowly raised his hand in front of a countless number of gazes. After which, he gently swept it down from some distance away. When his hand was swung, a majestic, vast spiritual strength immediately swept down from the sky like a storm. The calm-faced Elder Qi Huo expression drastically changed at this moment. The indifferent expression of Xing Xiu had also instantly paled. The majestic spiritual strength appeared just like unending mighty wave as it swept through the sky. It carried an unusually frightening pressure that rushed toward the purple-robed, old man in a lightning-like manner. Space trembled wherever it passed. Threads of dark black lines quietly spread. Although the spiritual strength was without form or color, anyone who possessed strength would be able to sense the frightening pressure that permeated the sky. This kind of pressure originated from deep within one's soul, causing one to possess a fluttering feeling. At this moment, the many private conversations came to an abrupt stop. The expressions of some of the people who had scoffed at Xiao Yan's earlier arrogance stiffened. At a glance, they appeared exceptionally comical. After having advanced to the Dou Zong class, the current Xiao Yan had likely reached the 7th tier if one were to talk about his alchemist tier. Moreover, due to his spiritual strength being outstanding to begin with, it was likely that he would not be inferior to some true tier 7 alchemists. Such a frightening strength would naturally release an unusually powerful pressure when it was unleashed. Forget about Xing Xiu, who was only a tier 6 alchemist, even if he had reached the level of a Tier 7 alchemist, the outcome of his battle with Xiao Yan would be unpredictable. Elder Qi Huo was stunned as he watched the majestic strength that swept across the sky. A moment later, he inhaled a deep breath of air. His eyes revealed a shaken expression as he looked at Xiao Yan a short distance away. A hoarse voice that carried some disbelief was slowly emitted from his mouth, a Tier 7 alchemist. Spiritual strength was a fundamental ability that all alchemists relied on to survive because only by possessing powerful spiritual strength would an alchemist be able to control a flame and successfully refine a medicinal pill. Hence, the might of spiritual strength was directly linked to an alchemist's skill level. Many people in the Central Plains identified the gap between two alchemists through this spiritual strength. This was why Elder Qi Huo was able to reveal Xiao Yan's alchemist tier when he sensed his spiritual strength. Of course, a great storm rose within the heart of Elder Qi Huo at this moment. He had never expected Xiao Yan not only be a dozong, but also someone who possessed such deep attainments in terms of medicinal refinement skill. Tier 7. A Tier 7 alchemist. This status was of significant weight even in the Central Plains region. It should be known that an alchemist of such tier might not be at the peak within the Pill Tower, but was definitely considered a top existence. Moreover, the thing that really shocked Elder Qi Huo was Xiao Yan's age. Even with his experience, it was the first time that he had seen such a young Tier 7 alchemist in all his life. Such talent in both Dou Qi and pill refinement could really be described as monstrous. That old fellow Xing Xiu is going to be unlucky this time around. He dared to be so boastful. While Elder Qi Huo was feeling regretful for Xing Xiu, the regret in Xing Xiu's heart was more than 10 times greater than what the elder felt for him. Of course, anyone who faced such a majestic spiritual strength, that was heading toward them from all directions, would not appear calm. Xing Xiu's face had completely turned white at this moment. His eyes vaguely revealed a dullness and fear. Being an alchemist, he was even more sensitive to spiritual strength. The majestic strength that was heading toward him caused him to feel as though he was faced with a vast ocean. This kind of feeling was something that he had only sensed from some of the elders in the Pill Tower. Moreover, those elders all possessed a great reputation throughout the Central Plains region without exception. However, the one who gave him such a feeling this time around was not those elders from the Pill Tower. Instead, it was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. A Tier 7 alchemist? How is that possible? A crazy, ruthless expression surged into Xing Xiu's eyes after his body slightly trembled. He definitely did not believe that this younger generation, who appeared like a little fellow, was on the 7th tier, a level he only looked up to. The ruthless expression had just appeared when Xing Xiu swiftly took a couple of steps back. At this moment, he no longer bothered about those boastful words that he had spoken earlier. He let out a soft roar and a powerful spiritual strength poured out of his body. It swiftly agglomerated into an invisible spiritual barrier in front of him. Brat, forget about trying to play some tricks in front of the old me. Xing Xiu's eyes stared intently at Xiao Yan. He coldly cried out after the spiritual barrier was formed. Xiao Yan raised his eyes in the face of Xing Xiu's cry. The corner of his mouth was lifted into a mocking smile. This Xing Xiu was merely a Tier 6 alchemist, yet this person dared to show off his spiritual strength in front of him. It appeared as though this Xing Xiu was seeking his own suffering. Xiao Yan gently flicked his finger and softly said, "Go." His word had just sounded when the majestic spiritual strength, that swept through the sky, instantly gathered. It formed a substance-like spiritual hammer in front of an innumerable number of shocked eyes. After which, it ruthlessly fell and smashed against the thick spiritual barrier. Bang! The two suddenly collided and a shocking ripple spread out. It immediately unrolled over the open ground like a wave of water. In an instant, a slight tremble appeared in the open ground. Numerous cracks formed. Crack! An invisible ripple suddenly spread from the point of contact between the heavy hammer and the spiritual barrier. Xing Xiu's face also turned purple. He went all out to maneuver his spiritual strength before pouring it into the spiritual barrier. Break! Xiao Yan extended his hand. He pointed at Xing Xiu from a great distance. His finger pressed into empty air as he let out a soft laugh. The word had just left Xiao Yan's mouth when the energy on the spiritual heavy hammer suddenly soared. Immediately, a cracking sound appeared. Numerous cracked lines swiftly spread over the invisible barrier in front of Xing Xiu and the other shocked gazes present. Boom! While the crack lines spread, the crumbling spiritual barrier was finally unable to endure the frightening spiritual strength attack. It emitted a boom sound, transformed into countless number of fragments, and blasted apart. Grog! The spiritual barrier blasted apart. The expression of Xing Xiu, who was connected to it, instantly turned white. Immediately, a mouthful of fresh blood was spat out. His body also flew back as though he had suffered a serious blow. He landed heavily on the ground and formed a scar that was nearly 100 meters long before he finally paused. The entire place was silent. Numerous eyes were dull as they looked at Xing Xiu, who had fallen to the ground. No one knew whether he was dead or alive. For an instant, no one opened their mouths. One strike, a Tier 6 alchemist was defeated after only one exchange. Moreover, he was defeated quite miserably. The person who had managed to do this was merely a young man, only 20 years old or so. Silence continued for a moment before it was finally broken by the sound of someone inhaling a cold breath. Numerous eyes carried a fiery heat as they slid to the young man who had not even taken a step forward. At this moment, everyone could guess that this person's tier was likely even higher than Xing Xiu's tier. Xing Xiu was a Tier 6 alchemist. Since Xiao Yan was of an even higher tier, the answer to his level seemed obvious. Tier 7. Only an alchemist of this tier would be able to turn a Tier 6 alchemist into such a miserable state in a spiritual strength fight. This person is a Tier 7 alchemist. The throats of countless number of people rolled. The expressions in their eyes had also become dull. Tier 7 alchemist, this was not an ordinary heavyweight. An alchemist of this tier would definitely be a top existence within the Burning Flame Valley or even the Pill Tower. Uptodat dfrm no/v/e/lb I n.co/m. Qing Yao and the entire Qing clan were stunned as they looked at Xing Xiu, who was lying in the distance with no one knowing whether he was still alive. Only a moment later did they swallow a mouthful of saliva with much difficulty. A Tier 7 alchemist. Their bodies involuntarily felt chill as they trembled when they thought of this. A person of such an existence would not have much difficulty destroying their Qing clan. All he needed to do was open his mouth and many extremely strong people would happily act on his behalf. The ability of a Tier 7 alchemist to gather helpers was something that no one dared to doubt. This Lu clan, when did they get to know an alchemist of this tier? Why is it that I have never even heard any news of it? Qing Yao's expression was volatile. Thoughts flew around his heart. A Tier 7 alchemist was an important person that was beyond what a clan like theirs could hire. He could not understand why the Lu clan could invite him over. A short distance away from Qing Yao, Lu Qing, Lu Fei, and the others were also looking at Xing Xiu on the ground in the distance with wide-open mouths. Lu Qing's group felt a kind of ridiculous feeling when Xing Xiu was unable to even endure one exchange with Xiao Yan. That was a Tier 6 alchemist. Tier 7 alchemist, the two white-haired, old men behind Lu Qing slowly inhaled a breath of air at this moment. Their tone contained a joy that could not be suppressed as they asked, "This Mr. is a Tier 7 alchemist. Clan head, is he really your friend?" Lu Qing's heart involuntarily felt proud when he heard the disbelief in the tone of their voices. These two old fellows might be the elders of the clan, but they had always objected to him being chosen as the clan head. Today, he could coincidentally use Xiao Yan's face to dampen their spirits. Lu Qing might feel proud in his heart, but his expression did not change. He replied in a faint voice, "If he is not my friend, do you two elders think that someone else would intervene?" The two elders smiled in embarrassment when they heard this. However, they did not retort. If Lu Qing really possessed a Tier 7 alchemist friend, it would undoubtedly bring a great joy to the Lu clan. "This senior, may I know if there is an end result for this match?" Xiao Yan waved his sleeves and the majestic spiritual strength, that spread through the sky, instantly disappeared. He looked to Elder Qi Hua as inquired with a smile. Upon hearing Xiao Yan's words, Elder Qi Hua's eyes hurriedly withdrew from Xing Xiu in the distance, whose fate was unknown. A rare smile surfaced on his face as he nodded. "Young friend's strength is extraordinary. The victory naturally belongs to you. Cuckoo, the management rights for the Tianhuang city's wormhole for the next 3 years will belong to the Lu clan."